everybody. Welcome back. I am David Bloom. I am the host of Bloom and Tech Podcast, and I run people like Forbes. We're here at the E3 Esports Zone. I am with the pioneering esports god, Kim Rom, who is now with the cool PC gamer tech site X-Plane to talk. He's going to explain about X-Plane. So Kim, let's start out. It's got to be interesting for you. You told me this is your 20th anniversary at E3. Do you remember those long ago days and what this place was like? Because this is, I think, here is where it was still going then. They had a couple of years in Atlanta. They said that was a bad idea. It came on back here. What was it like for you then, and what's it like now?
Well, I remember my first E3 was 1999, I believe. And I remember going to the airport in Copenhagen. And I was like dead set on having to get new shoes before I arrived, so I stopped
Very
at like
important.
at like a male dress thing, bought like nice suit shoes, and day one I was ready to kill myself.
Oh my God, you got suits like dress shoes for this place? I mean, you're like required to have your kicks, man, because you're not going to survive otherwise. I did 6.5 miles of walking yesterday and dragged my butt back here just to be with you, and you've gotten smart. Show them what you're wearing now.
Over the time, you get smarter, right?
You get a little smarter. We hope we grow with wisdom, right? So you had the wrong shoes the first day. It was gigantic then, it's gigantic now. Do you see anything different in terms of what kinds of games and things like that? The technology have changed so much, and you're the tech guy now.
Actually, I would say no. Like I would say the technology has reached a point where you have to use a lot less imagination to understand what's going on, right? Things are explained a lot more clearly than they were 20 years ago, where you had to, okay, that's a cowboy.
Right, it's really obvious what that thing is. Whatever it is, I can kind of guess what it, because it looks really good.
But it was still the same technology race. There was still, back then it would be graphics cards manufacturers and so on. They are less important today, but now it would be consoles or virtual reality. There's still always like a competition to present the entertainment in its best form.
Right. Now you, back then and for years since then, have been very involved in the esports world. So talk a little bit, I know you were involved with ESL, but a lot of other sort of major organizations over the last 2 decades in the esports space. Tell me a little bit about where the esports business has gone. It feels to me like it's a 20-year overnight sensation.
Well, most successes are, 10 years overnight successes, right?
Right.
I think in 2001, we were in Dallas at a CPL event that was the biggest thing of its time. And there were 17,000 people that were watching this thing. And we all sat there like, we're making history. This is amazing.
17,000 feels like a preliminary match in, I don't know, a new game they just popped out or something these days.
Oh, absolutely. But back then it felt like, truly, truly special. And today, when you walk away with less than 1 million concurrent from an event, you're like, oh God, what happened?
Okay, you're embarrassed, right? It's like, oh, you had a bad day. So now the numbers are huge. Does that change the game? Does it change the way the games get done? Does it change the kinds of games that get made?
So on June 19th, 1999, Counter-Strike was released in the first version, beta 0.1.
Another 20-year anniversary.
Yes,
yeah.
And you know what? For me, that was a defining moment in gaming culture, not just in esports. Esports was more or less born at that moment. Gaming became social. That was the first time where gamers would find each other online, almost like a dating service.
They could talk.
We have this thing in common.
Right.
Let's meet and get fucking and let's meet and get hammered.
Get hammered, yes. You were about to use the Danish term, I think, for getting hammered. Thor's hammer or something, yes. I think. And so they were able to get together, they were able to connect, they were able to coordinate their raids and all that. But that allowed a whole bunch of different stuff and changed, as you say, the whole direction of gaming.
Yeah, it wasn't just a new game, it was a new way of being a player.
Right. And before we had consoles where you could play on the same screen, you had shared screens, but you weren't able to really connect with anybody anywhere else.
No, I was working in television at the time, and we had like a wall where we would play Nintendo 64 GoldenEye against each other.
Right.
But the social experience was limited to whoever was in the room.
And whoever you were yelling at in the room,
yes,
right.
Updating in 8 FPS while you were trying to shoot someone in the throat.
Yeah, that's high quality there. Now, in the years since, you've been involved in these different organizations. Are you still directly involved in any esports stuff?
Absolutely, I've started my own, as we all tend to do at the end of the day.
Right.
No, I've been. I was the guy who built a peripheral company called SteelSeries. I ran marketing for 8 years.
Okay.
At one point in time, that company probably sponsored 50% of the world's top teams.
Wow.
So I had a chance to get to know, a lot of athletes and travel
Right.
with them and
Right.
see them at tournaments and get ready for tournaments and so on. And
It's harder to do that now. There's so many more teams and so much more money chasing it. Nobody could do 50%.
No one could do that anymore. And maybe that's also a good thing,
Right, right. Spread it out a little bit. I mean, it's across the globe. Now, talk to me. Explain. First of all, spell explain so people can find it online because it's a little bit different spelling than the word explain.
Xplayn. Explain.
Okay.
So Explain is a brand that I first launched it in 2001. It was probably the first profitable coverage website of esports in the world.
That, as a journalist, I can tell you that's remarkable to have somebody make money out of writing about anything. So.
And in 2001, I went from running one of the biggest gaming websites in Denmark that I had built over a period of 3 years to starting this website. And all my colleagues in this were like, wait. You're making a website about one game? What's wrong with you? How that doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
One game.
Well, you might be able to do it now with Fortnite, maybe. You got 250 million followers. There's so much going on. They're always changing things. Maybe you could do it with them, but it's sort of hard to think about anybody else you could do that with, right?
Well, yes and no. Like I think the difference was that back then, games were thought of like a thing. You would buy it, you would play it for maybe 3 weeks. They would be done. You would beat the computer, right?
You'd play it through. It's like on to the next, and they wouldn't give you new content either.
Absolutely not. Like they didn't even have distribution methods to actually do that very well.
Right. How would you even get it there, right?
Yeah. And then in 1999, Counter-Strike popped up. I was running this gaming website. I started a Counter-Strike section. That Counter-Strike section in about a year grew bigger
than everything else.
Yes, than the biggest.
So the tail started wagging the dog, and you said, "Okay, I'm going with the tail."
Yes.
And is that site still out there? I mean,
no. So that website, I closed it down. It closed down in 2014. It was the home of the Danish Counter-Strike community for a decade and a half. I closed it down in 2014. I did something else, and as I was working on this new project that I'm doing, I decided, you know what, that name means something in Denmark. Who cares? It doesn't really matter. But for the rest of the world, it's still a good name to explain the thing that I want to do.
Right. Okay.
So I decided to revive it and go with it again.
You revived it, but not just for Counter-Strike. But Counter-Strike's out there too. There's lots of Counter-Strike players. I think it's interesting because it is so old. It has an older player base. I mean, I think on average the teams that play Counter-Strike tend to be. I mean, other games they tend to be. Up and out by the time they're 23, and they can be like 30, 35 or something playing Counter-Strike. I mean, it's a whole different world in some ways from the rest of competitive gaming in some ways.
Yes.
Now, with Explain, though, you all are doing things like gear. So what kinds of gear have you written about recently that really caught your eye, that you think are really, game changers out there?
So I think what's game-changing about peripherals is that the nature of them has changed. So I hold maybe 10 patents in hardware design of coming up with a way of combining stats with how you do something on a mouse. I think peripherals fundamentally have changed to become more like running shoes than they are these high-tech nuclear-powered devices from Star Trek.
That's probably a good thing in some ways.
I think so, but when you go buy a pair of sneakers,
they're still pretty high-tech. I mean,
but I don't know what the plastic treatment was of specifically the sole, right? And I don't need to know that for my mouse either. So we're taking a more practical approach to peripherals in general, where we're sort of trying to reinvent the review. Like the process of how do I define if this was a meaningful experience to use this peripheral for me, and how do I share that with the community at large?
Well, now that's interesting. So what we're talking about, instead of getting into the nitty-gritty of 1440 dots per inch and all those stats, which start to make sense if you read and start to go, okay, so that's more than this and less than that, but you need to understand what that actually translates to in actual performance, right? So that's the real challenge for a gamer. It's like, well, how does my game get better, right?
Exactly. How does this correlate to me? What is my experience of this?
Right.
And that's very simple. You look at the statistics of the community, everyone else who uses this mouse roughly uses it for 9 months, then they want to change something else. Okay, that tells you something, right?
That does tell you
that's
something.
a data point.
Right.
So what we're basically trying to do is to make a better discovery of these peripherals that are available to you than anyone else out there. So like, you can get the same shopping experience as you would get on Amazon. We'll just hopefully do a much better job at presenting the 5 candidates that would fit well into your hand, into your size, into how left-handed, right-handed, whatever
Right.
it is.
Right. So that's an interesting way to think about it. So, but that's also, I would think, more of a challenge to write a good review because it's so personal to each person. When you can just rely on the stats, right? It's like, it is 1440 DPI or whatever.
So some of the best reviews on the internet of games are on the Steam platform because they're capable of combining 2 different things. My experience, like my words, what was my experience with the game?
My own subjective experience
Yes.
as a critical player of games.
Absolutely. With the time I've actually spent playing the game when I wrote the review.
Okay.
So we're trying to combine those 2 things. Like, so a review of me doing a review of a mouse is interesting only if you know how long I've used the mouse, what I used it for, and what game I played with it. If you play different games, maybe your experience will be completely different.
Right.
So that's the level of granularity we're going into on the Explain platform.
So tell me how you all get access, because I do see the value of that, but how do you access, look, the whole notion of online reviews is under deep question in a lot of areas because,
it's mostly BS. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's mostly BS. People question the whole Amazon faking their reviews. You've got Rotten Tomatoes saying if you can't prove you watched the movie, you don't get to review it, so you can't jack with the reviews. Things like that are going on. So how do you guarantee that data is good? Where do you get the data that says this person played 9 months with this mouse? Where does that come from?
From the gamer himself. So for a gamer to log onto the platform, he either has to have a Steam account or he has to have a Discord account. That already filters out most of the marketeers in the world. They're not smart enough to make a Discord account. Second of all,
okay. Well, he means that, but he doesn't mean that, okay? Marketers of the world.
I meant that.
We love you all very much.
So we actually just ask really, really simple questions. So when you sign up to the platform, like, how long have you been using the mouse you're using right now? We make it very simple for you to choose, this month, this year. And then we tell you, okay, you've been using it for 36 months. That it puts you here compared to the rest of the community. Already, during the sign-up process, we're telling you stuff about the gear that you're using that you might not have actually thought about. And by asking you
you're gathering demographic data on the front end as they come in.
And by asking you 5 simple questions, I will know a lot about your peripherals. Like, 1, do you think this mouse has made you a better gamer? That's a really simple question to answer.
It really is, right?
But it's really hard to think about. Like,
well, if you're thinking hard about, what have I got here? You're right. It's like all of a sudden, that kind of is literally the bottom line.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Does it make me a better gamer?
Is this mouse comfortable to use after 8 hours? Yes, no.
Right.
Then I know something
about
the
the comfort. What else are
comfort.
you doing with your life after 8 hours? but yes. But that's interesting. So 5 questions. So does it make you a better gamer? Can you use it for 8 hours and still feel okay without your hand cramping up or any more than you would doing anything for 8 hours?
Does the mouse allow you to play to your fullest potential?
Right. So what are the other? Do you have any other questions? What are the other questions there?
We go into comfort. We go into satisfaction. Do you feel like the money you put into this is worth it? We do a real-time price check as you're signing up. Oh, the mouse that you say you're using right now costs $69.99 at Amazon. Is this fair to the community?
Right.
Yes, no.
No, that's an interesting question too, because years and years and years ago, I did some work with a website that was trying to get together, connecting people who liked wine with wines that were good, but would be good for their, but were good for their particular taste pattern, right? But also the conversation was what we called a quality price ratio, a QPR.
Yes.
Because the idea was, there's a $15 wine that's pretty good. It's not as good as the $90 wine, but I can get 6 bottles of that for the 90 one that's maybe slightly better.
Yes.
So, it's the same thing. You're saying if I've got a $30 headset that does just fine as opposed to the $200 one, maybe this is really what you should go ahead and get.
Maybe that's great for you.
It's great, right. Yes. So, but it's putting it in perspective. If you've got the Rolls Royce, it damn well better be awesome, right?
Absolutely.
So that's part of it.
We're making a hardware review site. That's where we don't write the reviews. The audience does that. Right. And we're also not trying to sell you anything. In fact, we're almost trying to tell you what not to buy.
Well, so how do you make money then? If you're not selling things, you're almost the anti-sales machine here. How are you making money?
Are you familiar with the website The Wirecutter?
I know the Wirecutter, but it's attached to the New York Times, which helps.
So they have like modernized what the affiliate model could look like, where they have one buy button that instantly signifies to you, oh, I get the buying experience from Amazon that I want.
Right.
But I also get a better product recommendation than whatever garbage I found on that platform.
Okay, so by not selling stuff, or not allowing advertising, you're not as beholden to them, and they can say, if I liked this review or this one, I can buy it, and you scrape off a little bit, 10% or whatever, and that's enough to pay for more camo pants and really fancy E3 shoes. Yeah, you hope so. I got you here from Denmark, from Spain. I'm sorry. You're in where in Spain are you these days?
I live in the Alicante region.
Okay, that's lovely. And why did you end up there from Denmark? It's very different.
I have lived in Taiwan. I have lived in America for a number of years. I've lived in Germany. I've lived in Poland. I travel wherever business finds me.
Okay, and now Spain is the hot place?
It's really hot.
It's really hot right now. I say that in Palm Springs, 2 hours from here is 115 today. So,
I wanted to live in a place where the only stress I have in my body is my stress, not everyone else's.
Not everyone else's. Boy, bless you for that. I mean, good luck, too. So in terms of where you go, Explain is keeping you entertained right now. How big is the site in terms of the number of products, and how many folks are involved in getting all that out the door?
So we're just launching. We're in beta right now. We'll probably leave beta at the end of the year. We're about 6 people involved in the project right now. We have every peripheral that's ever been used in esports.
Really?
Within a mouse, keyboard, headsets, mousepad category. So we're about 1,500 products.
Okay.
My girlfriend and I, who built the website together, we spent almost 2 years gathering technical data for all these products and putting it into different databases. We cover, I think, 1,300 pro gamers, what gear they're using that we have like in the databases, and we are over the next 6 months adding all that together and presenting it to the audience.
So when we say esports, there are lots of mouses out there that aren't really built for the folks on stage right next to us who are showing a bunch of indie esports games, for instance. So you're really talking just about the high end. This is really the gamer equivalent of the race car reviews, right?
Absolutely.
It's like, here's the best shifter on your NASCAR or your IndyCar or your Formula One
or here's the best one for $50.
And here's the best one for $50.
Yes.
But it still works apparently for folks in esports.
Absolutely.
So that's an interesting, and obviously your background with esports is so long and rich. That makes sense, and you know so many people. Do you find people frequently say, we want that one, or we like that one? I mean, are you seeing some clear winners at this point that you could talk about?
I think it's like phones. I think we have a tendency to become brands loyalists or some religious zealots, like to some certain degree.
Right.
So
HyperX, for instance.
You're either into Android or you're into iOS, right?
Right. Well, yeah.
You're either into Razer or you're into
war.
Logitech or you're into SteelSeries. I feel like the brand sort of becomes like almost like jeans and clothes.
Right. Right. You're right. I mean, you like these jeans. You're going to keep getting those jeans because they fit. You like that mouse because you like the way they do it and they lay things out. But even there, though, are there? I mean, you're seeing, I guess, the different tribes, right, for the various brands. Which are there tribes that are bigger, doing better? I mean, how are you within esports?
On a global level in esports, Logitech and Razer are probably doing the best right now.
Okay.
And what we're going to see over the next year is like probably a bloodbath in retail. As Logitech.
Oh, I think that bloodbath in retail has been bloodbathing for a while.
Oh, yeah, I don't
now.
think it started yet for this specific segment.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's going to get really tough.
Really? Now, why do you say that? Why the next year and a half that the esports video game?
Logitech is not doing super well as a big company, but they're doing really well in the PC gaming peripheral section.
Okay.
That has been the locomotive that drive a lot of the other things that they do. Razer has just IPO'd and want to maintain a stock price at certain level. So
yeah,
those
they've
two
got
are going to do
pressure to really
and
make
then you
it
have
go.
Corsair, you have HyperX, you have all these companies coming in, and they want a piece of the pie too, and they're making great products.
Right.
There's too many people making great products for the price points to probably be sustainable for the industry long term.
So HyperX is one of the sponsors here. They've got a pretty entertaining. It's not the Game of Thrones.
It's the Game of Wasps.
It's not the Iron Throne. It's the keyboard and mouse throne,
Yes.
which is pretty entertaining, and I'm sure it'll
It's
get shown.
It's the Mind Wasp machine.
Yeah, exactly. So people like them are pushing really hard in this space, but you're saying that we will probably see some shakeout in that space over the next couple of years.
There's 20 Chinese companies that make roughly the same products that are waiting to enter the market.
Interesting.
So one of the things that I'll help do is to like sort those products out and help the audience make smart decisions.
Right. Now that's a really interesting challenge, because you're right. You're going to see a lot of low-cost challengers. We saw it in the mobile space is sort of notorious. All of a sudden, you had a bunch of phones that were dirt cheap, were pretty good, and the incumbents had to fight back or couldn't. I mean, Sony isn't in the same place it used to be in terms of electronics, for instance, because of the cheap Chinese and North Korean competitors who've gotten better and better and better. So where do you think that we'll see that most immediately? Is it going to be all across the whole esports gamer peripheral universe?
I think it's going to start in retail first, just because retail is under scrutiny and pressure, as you already said, right?
Right.
So when the margin starts going down, it becomes even harder to sustain that.
Right.
But we will see that materialize across the industry itself. Like we're long overdue for a correction in the market. And once that happens, then we are looking at an esports industry that is mainly driven by marketing budgets.
Okay.
That's
and who's got the marketing budget, right?
One of the first things that gets cut in a crisis or in a recession is your marketing budget, of course.
Well, that's the dumbest thing. I mean, I don't want to encourage more marketing, but the reality is, if people don't hear about you, you're done, right? I mean, if they can't, it doesn't matter how good it is. I mean, you can write a nice review and that'll help, but you got to find out about it too. So that's going to be an interesting thing. What does that mean for all the esports players out there, whether they're pros or they're coming up and trying to just play competitively?
So we don't have a lot of historic data for this, but we have one, like the recession in 2008, 2009.
Right.
The industry was cut in half.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. Back then, it was a very different industry. Like companies like Valve and Riot didn't care. They weren't there with products in the market that they were supporting at the time. So when I say didn't care, like they didn't have a viable product that they could do something with, right?
Right.
Today, the publishers are very interested in getting their games played and expanding that ecosystem. In 2008, 2009, most of the money in the space came from Microsoft. It came from Nvidia, companies like that.
Intel, I think, was putting some money in.
Yes. And then you had like peripheral companies that made up maybe 40% of the whole space. When they started pulling out their budgets, there was a lot of teams that started folding. So if I just sort of look at like the prize money you could win back then that could sustain you as a human being,
right,
the industry was cut in half.
The livable wage, and so a lot of that marketing budget was going into the tournaments. So the issue is, can we keep it going for the health of esports as it's bubbling up? And I think that one of the things that's different, or I believe is different now, because we're seeing it. I just wrote a piece for Forbes about, and for TV Rev about the explosion of like college esports arenas, sites like Super League Gaming that make it possible to have your local restaurant or movie theater become an esports tournament location. So it's popping up in all kinds of places. But I'm sort of curious about, as it's blowing up, are there new kinds of advertisers beyond the endemics like the peripherals that are helping make it a healthier?
Oh, absolutely. Like everything from like car insurance companies to Mercedes, right? Like,
right.
So the ecosystem is no longer like just nerds like me and my generation. Now it's like everyone. And that's also, I think, the next evolution of what esports is. Like the reason why esports will do much better in whatever coming recession hits us is because it's no longer defined to nerd culture. It's just culture.
Right. Well, I think that's the point of all of Subnation is it's tied to gaming, but it's about just this culture of lifestyles of what people are into.
Absolutely. Like so my girlfriend has a son. He's 9 years old. Him and his friends don't sit and discuss soccer. They discuss Fortnite.
Or FIFA.
Yeah, that's the only thing that they care about. Like,
right.
So, like what we're witnessing now is like a cultural disruption of sports as an ecosystem.
Right.
Like, how many 17-year-old kids today do you think are going to go out and like, oh, I can't wait to become, a U.S. soccer sports star? Or do you think they're going to be a Dota 2 star that, where you can become a millionaire at age 17?
Right. Sure.
I'm pretty sure I know what they're going to set their sights on.
There's a whole set of them definitely going that way. Some of them like playing soccer. They like to kick the ball around. But you're right. I mean, the opportunity becomes a whole nother kind of star, and you can practice all day and all night long if you want to.
Think about it this way. If you were born in 98 or later, you have never not known a world where esports wasn't normal. It's us old farts that remember the world that before that, right?
I fully agree, except that I know lots of people that still can't get their head around esports. And I say, look, do you ever watch a football game or a basketball game? They go, yeah, sure, of course. I was like, well, what's the difference between you who've never played football or basketball watching a basketball game and people who've played these video games watching other people play these video games and do well at them?
In 2008, I had multiple friends who told me, I will never use a phone without a keyboard.
Yeah, BlackBerry.
I don't see them anymore. I don't see them anymore.
They're with BlackBerry in the ghost-ridden town of dead devices. There's no doubt about it, right? No, I mean, in Hollywood in particular, where I do a lot of writing, I mean, agents used to have their BlackBerry surgically grafted to their hand, and they would da-da-da-da with one hand, and they could da-da-da-da and send out 1,000 text messages to their assistant and all their clients and the 15 deals they were trying to cut that day. And now they're all on something else, right? And rolling 200 calls that way. So where do you think the peripheral world can go? So we've got this very established ecosystem of, keyboard, mouse pad, the things that you review. But we've got things like VR games coming, and we've partly here really, but and AR games that are really interesting, and some of the things that they're possible as we get more and more power. We've got 5G coming down the pike. We've got over here the cable industry talking about 10G. They're landline based, even higher 10 gigabit speed stuff. We've got even the broadcasters trying to figure out ways to do better connectivity and interactivity. So where do the peripherals go, and what do you think's cool that's going to be coming down the pike that might change the future of esports?
So I think we're pretty much set for innovation in the industry, which sounds scary, but I would equate it to the tennis catcher. I without knowing, my guess is that fundamentally the tennis catcher hasn't fundamentally changed in the last 10, 20 years.
Right.
Same thing with the badminton catcher or the whatever ball thingy that they're hitting. You
mean the racket itself.
Yeah,
but the rackets did change a lot in tennis. I know they went crazy and they strung them up with the nylon and as opposed to wood, and now they're like these rocket devices.
But the fundamental what it is, right? There might be lightweight materials, but they're not going to be anti-gravity all of a sudden, or made of like a laser or something, right?
Not yet. We're doing VR tennis soon, and I'll look forward to that.
So fundamentally, I think the tool sets that allow you to perform with high levels of precision are more or less done. What will change will be the games that we play. It won't be necessarily the peripherals. I think there's still some stuff to do for integration. When I press WASD, how hard I press them should determine how fast I move in the game. That level of integration still has some room for innovation. But more or less, I think the peripherals are actually done. Okay,
they're there, and it's just going to be working around the edges. Well, that's probably a good place to stop. I'm David Bloom with Kim Rom, and you've just been hearing about X-Plane and explaining about where the world of peripherals and esports are going. Thank you very much.
Thank you.